If you care to get your calculator out and plug in 186,000 multiplied by 60, multiplied by 60, multiplied by 24, then multiplied by 365, that will give you how many miles there is in a light year. And it's almost 6 million million. Now, when I was young, a billion used to be a million million, but it clearly is 1,000 million now. So this 6 billion they call, this 6 million million they call a trillion. 6 trillion, I mean. Anyway, now, multiply 6 trillion by 120, and that is how many light years our galaxy is wide. And they reckon it's 15 light years, that's 15 times 6 trillion, deep. And it's a disk. And our galaxy is just one of billions in the universe. Isn't that absolutely astonishing? Now, while you're recovering from that fact, take a look at this. This is not normally the sort of thing I would wear, I have to say, but I rather like this. It's a rugby shirt and it's got all the emblems from the various rugby countries. And I have to say, rugby players look fairly interesting. They're built quite nicely anyway, even if their faces are a bit battered looking. But you don't always have to look at those, do you? Anyway. Now, going back to this. So that's just one galaxy. And there's billion of us. Billions and billions of them. I don't know about you, but that completely boggles my mind. And what boggles it even further is the fact that supposedly there was nothing, and then something happened, and nothing banged, and all this came of it. Well, that seems a bit unlikely to me. Yes, and I know there'll be plenty of scientists out there saying that I'm just a complete wanker who doesn't understand. But you don't either. Because you might be able to go right back, but you can't go right back to that very beginning bit, and none of you know. Now, the alternative to this is not creation. The alternative to this is, I don't know. What's wrong with I don't know? Why do we have to be certain about anything? Because it's rather scary to not be, I guess. One thing I cannot accept, and that is that this all happened by accident, and that this will all disappear one day. Well, we know that it is going to disappear one day. Sorry, that isn't quite what I meant to say. But if it is really true that when we're dead, then all this is just meaningless. There's no meaning in it whatsoever. And I really don't have any time for these people that say, oh yes there is, the meaning is to make life as good as you can for other people and to enjoy it as much as you can. For what point? What's the fucking point of that? When it's all going to amount to nothing. I'm sorry, but I just don't get it. I cannot see any reason at all. And to be quite honest, if it was absolutely proven to me that this was all there was, then shoot me now. Because I don't want to bother. I really just don't want to bother. There's nothing that could possibly make all this worthwhile. If there was nothing. Because, well, it's just, I'm sorry, but that boggles my mind too. I just don't see the point. There isn't one. But as I've said, the alternative to this is not creation. The alternative to this is not God. I don't see why it either has to be God or Richard fucking Dawkins. Or that knobber Professor Brian Cox. Sorry, I use that word because he uses that word about us. So I think he's a knobber. for even thinking about it. Good. I should have realised to pause that because I'm downloading something else, like my bloody sat-navy thing. Anyway, so, what? The sun's going to run out one day. Do you know, when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, when I was involved with the Jehovah's Witnesses, I mean, as far as they were concerned, heaven was going to be on this earth, and we would no longer be threatened by things like lions, and they would show pictures of people happily frolicking in the grass, playing with a lion. I mean, Jesus. Well, not Jesus, because they didn't really believe in him. Not in that sense, anyway. But, I mean, how just ridiculous. I mean, I don't actually never noticed them frolicking with any snakes. I don't suppose there are going to be any snakes in heaven. And I wonder about viruses and bacteria. They're all living things. Did God create all them too? Probably. But, you know, they never took into consideration the fact that that's impossible. But there again, if they actually believe that Satan put all the fossils there to fool us, then I suppose they can believe that God can make the universe stand still. And the sun will just burn forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. Although I suppose the fact that it's going to burn for another however many billion years will seem like forever. I won't give a shit because I won't be here. And nor will any of you watching this. And doesn't it make you wonder, you know, the amount of change there's been on this planet in my lifetime, I mean technology-wise. Can you imagine what we might... If it just really pees me off that I'm not going to be here in 100 years' time to know what else happened. It's like never knowing what happened at the end of Dynasty. But it is, it's like that. I don't really want all this to go on without me, thank you very much. Do you want it to go on without you? I want to know. I'm nosy. I want to know what's happened next. I don't want to bow out before it's all done. But I'm going to, no matter what. So I refuse to believe that's the end. Because I don't want it to be. Actually, in a lot of ways, it would be quite nice if it was. Just shut up, for fuck's sake. That would be really quite nice. To just stop my brain working altogether. So I don't have to think about anything. And particularly not the, 6 trillion miles. Can you even imagine 6 trillion miles? I mean, you couldn't travel 6 trillion miles in your lifetime. You just couldn't. And if you ever fancied go... Oh God, it's a good job I caught that one before it came out. And I was in such a bad mood earlier and I've made myself laugh and I don't know whether I dare make you laugh. Because you'll probably just think I'm completely disgusting. But I was going to ask if you ever fancied going through a black hole. And I'm sorry, but that just sounds... It's right, I've calmed myself down now. I feel all hot in the face. But can you imagine? And have you ever thought that we might already be in a black hole and that there's more, a lot more, and all this business about parallel universes, and there could be lots of copies of me all having sort of slightly different lives according to the choices. And this is scientists, physicists that come up with this stuff, and they laugh at us spiritualists. Or at spiritualists, I should say. I shouldn't say us, because I'm not. I have my own viewpoints about everything. But one thing I do think, because I've already said that I believe that we survive physical death, that our consciousness does. And I actually don't think it's a spiritual thing. I think it's a scientific thing. It's just a matter of fact. It's just not a... it's not all harps and angel choirs and worshipping and praising God. Could you imagine an ego so big that that's what it requires? Well, you can, can't you? Because human beings, lots of them throughout history have been like that, and they've been the most vile people. And yet we seem to have made God like that. Do you think really, if there is a God, he needs me to tell him how brilliant he is? Or she is? No, I don't think so. Really, modern day religion is no different to sacrificing live babies to the volcano god. We just have a more sophisticated version of it, you know, of appeasing the gods. And that's what it's all about. It's about appeasing whatever this God might be, because we just can't possibly conceive of a God of love. But anyway, that's another subject altogether. But, you know, I just don't see why survival of consciousness has to have anything to do with all that. I think it's just something that happens. And I think that scientists are just as resistant to the idea as, you know, fundamentalist religionists are, because they might have to change some of their deep-seated ideas. You know, it's just as difficult for them to have their world turned upside down as it is for anybody else. And having a world turned upside down is an extremely painful business. It's quite shocking. You know, when you discover that the world isn't quite the way you thought it was, it can be just awful. Probably one of the most painful things that, well, is the most painful thing that can ever happen. You know, to have your worldview fall apart and you have to rebuild it all over again. And that's what happens when we lose a child, or a husband, a wife, somebody that we love very dearly, or our job. All sorts of reasons that our view of the world changes. Our world actually changes. And you know, our world changes according to how we think. But anyway, I like to, despite the fact that he's a knobber, I do like to watch Professor Brian Cox and his Mysteries of the Universe, or Wonders of the Universe, or whatever it is. I've got both the DVDs of his, and they just completely blow my mind. I just can't take it in. And it makes me want to cry, and it fills me with awe, and it frightens me. It just... I mean, our brains are just not built to comprehend this any further than, you know, science already has. And I do think they've got an awful long way to go. And I think that, you know, we haven't seen anything yet. I think it's going to get even more surprising. And I just hope that I get to know about it. You know, if when I'm dead, I'm going to kick up a stink, because I shan't be very pleased. I don't think that's going to happen somehow. But, well, of course, if when I was dead, then I wouldn't know, would I? But, as I said, I don't think that's going to happen. I don't understand how it's not going to happen. But there's lots of things I don't understand, but they happen. You know, and you can sit there and think that communication with people that have already died doesn't happen. That's fine. That precognition doesn't happen. That's fine. I know both of them do happen. Have no doubt about it at all. I don't understand what it means. Scientists do. Scientists know that it means some of their theories need adjusting, and they can't possibly do that. So, of course, they reject the idea completely. But just think about it. You know, how immense is our universe, and, you know, the idea that a being did all this is just really rather silly. You know, not when you consider, no, when you stop and you actually view the universe as we know it, you know, and you no, it's just completely outrageous to suggest such a thing. But science is nowhere near answering it yet either. They might think they can. And I'm not absolutely convinced about evolution either, although there doesn't seem to be a better alternative to it. But that is something that I find just really difficult to believe too. I mean, I understand the basic concept, although somebody suggested I didn't, because if I did understand it I wouldn't have difficulty believing it. But that is unfair, and that's no different to what a fundamentalist would say. Oh, the only reason you don't believe in Jesus is because the devil's holding you back. And, you know, that's just the scientific equivalent to tell you that. But they say that if you can't reduce something... All I know is that my body doesn't work without a liver, without kidneys, without a brain, without a gut, without a stomach, without a heart, without the skin, without the blood vessels. So I don't quite get how it all evolved in one working bit. Whole, I mean. I thought that wasn't the idea. I mean, if we were a tiny little cell that you can't even see, and gradually became this, well, that doesn't, I'm sorry, but that just doesn't make any sense, because at some point a heart must have been produced, and a heart can't work without something to work with, like blood and the blood vessels, and then you need kidneys and liver, and you see what I mean? Oh, I do beg your pardon. Blame it on the Pepsi. Oh dear. Anyway, I'm not sort of going to give you any answers. I just waffle on about what I think about. But, you know, we have to use common sense. And I just think it's, you know, have you ever looked in the night sky and just seen the stars up there? Or the light from the stars that might not even exist because that light's coming from so far away it took so bloody long to get here. 120, our galaxy is 120 light years away, which is, hang on, 720 trillion. It would take light 720 trillion years. Fuck. That's, yeah, it would take light 720 trillion years to travel from one side of the universe to the other. Oh, do you know, that just does my head in completely. Well, it's sort of meaningless in a way, isn't it? Because you can't imagine it. Just can't. But there has to be... I'd be very surprised if there wasn't life elsewhere. What sort of life, I don't know. But I do reckon that we end up in a different sort of dimension when we leave the physical. Because, although this is quite amazing, it's not all that. When you think about it, I mean, look what happens to our bodies. It's hardly successful, is it? I mean, I'm well and truly buggered and I'm not that old. You know, and it's because my body's falling apart. My mind's never been better. Well, in my opinion. You can keep yours to yourself. But I can only go by how I feel. And I'm happy. And I haven't done any drugs today. I've got to, though. It's about time. I took some mild ones this morning, but I now need the heavier duty ones. Anyway, I'm going to go, but just, you know, think about it. Whatever happens is that you are all right, and in the end, it'll all be over. One way or the other, and so there isn't really anything to worry about. You certainly don't have to fear some fiery pit, or heaven for that matter. Some people would fear that. Well, I think I would too, because it doesn't sound too good a place to me, particularly if there aren't any animals there. Anyway, yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.